Welcome to Revenge with Shawn. Get ready for a dramatic story out of Reno, Nevada. I never imagined that a cheap plastic pregnancy test would be the sharp weapon that finally severed the bond with my family. I am Miranda, a 26-year-old warehouse manager who has spent her entire adult life raising 5 children that do not belong to me. I stood frozen in the center of our chaotic living room in Reno while stepping over piles of dirty laundry to watch my sister casually rub her stomach. She looked me straight in the eye with a smug grin to announce she was pregnant for the 6th time, even though she had not held a steady job in years. My stomach twisted with a sickening mix of nausea and absolute exhaustion because I knew exactly who was expected to pay for this new addition. I had just finished a grueling 60-hour work week only to come home and realize my sister expected me to sacrifice even more of my life for her irresponsible choices while her boyfriend sat idly on the couch. Finally found the courage to tell her that I was done funding her lifestyle and would not pay a single cent for this new baby. Her expression instantly shifted from smugness to pure rage as she screamed that I was ungrateful and threatened to kick me out on the street if I refused to comply. That specific moment of betrayal was the final straw that pushed me to choose my own survival over her parasitic demands. If you have ever felt like you are carrying the heavy weight of the world while everyone else around you just takes advantage of your hard work, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now to see exactly how I escaped this living hell. At 4 in the morning, the piercing sound of my alarm clock dragged me out of a fitful sleep before the sun had even touched the horizon of Reno. I forced my exhausted body out of bed because I knew that if I did not start the day now, the entire household would collapse into absolute chaos before breakfast. I stumbled into the kitchen to begin the daily marathon of preparing 5 separate lunchboxes while stepping over the sticky remnants of a party I never attended. Derek had left a pyramid of empty beer bottles on the counter for me to clean up, alongside the dirty dishes from his late-night snacking session. I silently cursed as I scrubbed the dried salsa off the table because I knew he would never lift a finger to clean up his own mess. The morning routine was a calculated military operation that required me to be in 3 places at once to get everyone ready for school on time. I reviewed the math homework for my 10-year-old nephew, Caleb, while simultaneously trying to braid the hair of my 7-year-old niece, Sophie, as she ate her cereal. My oldest nephew, Justin, was the only one who tried to help by gathering the backpacks. But even he looked exhausted from the constant noise in the house. I moved with frantic urgency because I had to leave for the warehouse in less than 30 minutes, or I would be late for my shift. I ran down the hallway to retrieve the diaper bag and paused for a brief second outside the master bedroom where Jada and Derek were sleeping. The door was firmly locked to keep out the noise of their own children, while my 4-year-old nephew Leo screamed in his crib just a few feet away. It filled me with a cold resentment to know that they were sound asleep in a warm bed, while I soothed their crying toddler and marshaled their older children out the door. Nobody ever asked me if I wanted this responsibility. Nobody ever sat me down and asked if I was okay. But somehow, over the years, I had become the invisible backbone holding everything together. I managed to drop the older kids at the bus stop and the younger ones at daycare before speeding toward the industrial district with my heart pounding in my chest. My shift at the warehouse was grueling, but the physical labor felt easier than the emotional burden waiting for me at home. I received a notification on my phone during my lunch break that made my stomach drop because it was a final warning from the utility company. I drove home in a panic to find a bright red shut-off notice taped humiliatingly to our front door because the electric bill was 3 months overdue. I stood on the porch shaking with anger because I had given Jada $600 last week, specifically to prevent this exact situation. I found a crumpled receipt in the overflowing kitchen trash can, which revealed she had spent the entire amount on designer maternity clothes instead of paying the bill. I had no choice but to transfer the money I had painstakingly saved for my next semester of college tuition to the utility company to keep the lights on. My degree felt further away than ever, drowning in someone else's irresponsibility while my future suffocated. The day continued to spiral downward when the high school called me, just as I returned to the warehouse floor to finish my shift. My 13-year-old niece, Megan, had been caught skipping class and getting into a verbal altercation with a teacher, which was completely out of character for her. I had to clock out early and lose vital hours of pay to sit in the principal's office because her mother refused to answer the phone. Megan looked at me with teary eyes and confessed that she acted out because she felt invisible at home, since Jada only cared about the new babies. I held her hand and promised to do better, even though I was already drowning in responsibilities that were not mine. The irony cut like a knife. Megan felt invisible because her own mother neglected her, and I was becoming invisible because I was too busy fixing everyone else's problems to save myself. I dragged myself through the front door at 7 in the evening to find Derek sitting on the couch watching sports while the kids complained they were hungry. I immediately went to the kitchen to boil water for spaghetti because it was the quickest and cheapest meal I could prepare after such a disastrous day. Jada finally emerged from the bedroom wearing her new designer clothes and complained that the house was messy despite doing nothing to clean it. We sat down to eat the pasta, but Derek pushed his plate away with a look of pure disgust after taking a single bite. He told me the sauce was bland and asked why I had not prepared steak since he had a specific craving for red meat that evening. I looked at this grown man who had contributed absolutely nothing to the household and felt a surge of rage that nearly made me scream. He had the audacity to demand a premium meal while I had just spent my education fund to keep the lights on for his video games. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I realized I was not living my life anymore. I was just slowly disappearing inside someone else's chaos. 3 days after Jada's announcement turned the house into an emotional battlefield, the situation escalated from passive aggression to an organized intervention led by the family matriarch. I was folding a mountain of laundry in the living room when a heavy and authoritative knock on the door signaled the arrival of the one person Jada always called for backup. My grandmother, Grandma Lorraine, stood on the porch with her purse clutched tightly against her chest and a look of severe disapproval painted on her face. She did not come to help scrub the filthy floors or cook for her great-grandchildren, but rather to hold court in the living room and judge my lack of financial contribution to Jada's expanding brood. Jada sat next to Grandma Lorraine on the sofa, with a hand resting protectively on her stomach, while Derek lurked in the kitchen doorway, like a silent enforcer waiting for his cue. Grandma Lorraine wasted no time in presenting her solution to the family's transportation problem, which apparently involved liquidating my personal assets for the greater good. "Miranda," she said, her voice dripping with that patronizing tone she always used when she wanted me to do something unreasonable. "You know your sister is in a delicate condition right now. Her feet are swollen, her back is killing her, and she absolutely needs reliable transportation to get to her prenatal appointments." I stood there holding a wet pillowcase, completely dumbfounded. Reliable transportation? Jada had totaled her last 3 cars through sheer negligence and reckless driving. She had gotten 3 speeding tickets in a single month and driven with expired registration for almost a year. Grandma Lorraine continued without pausing for my response. "You are going to sell your truck. That Toyota Tacoma you worked so hard to pay for is the perfect solution. Your sister needs it far more than you do. You can take the bus like everyone else." The room seemed to spin. That truck was not just a vehicle. It was my independence. It was my ability to escape. It was proof that I had accomplished something with my own 2 hands through years of overtime and sacrifice. Jada watched me with those cold, calculating eyes, waiting to see if I would cave, like I always did. Derek smirked from the kitchen doorway like he already knew I would fold under pressure. Grandma Lorraine clutched her purse like she had already mentally transferred the title to Jada's name. I opened my mouth to respond, but then something extraordinary happened. For the first time in my entire life, the word that came out was not yes. It was no. No, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I am not selling my truck. The room erupted. Grandma Lorraine gasped like I had just announced I was running away to join the circus. Jada's face turned red with rage as she stood up from the sofa, her pregnant belly preceding her like a weapon of manipulation. "You selfish witch!" she screamed, her voice reaching that pitch that made the younger children cover their ears in the other room. "I am carrying your blood and you will not even help me. You are disgusting. You have always been selfish and ungrateful. Mom was right to worry about you." Derek suddenly stepped into the living room with his chest puffed out, ready to intimidate me into submission. He had always relied on his size and aggressive tone to make people back down, but I was done backing down. "Then I guess I need to leave," I said, my voice remarkably calm despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. Those 7 words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The house went silent. Jada's jaw dropped. Grandma Lorraine's purse fell from her grip. Derek's face shifted from aggressive to genuinely shocked. "What did you just say?" Grandma Lorraine whispered, as if she could not believe what she had just heard. "I said I am leaving. I am done. I am done waking up at 4 a.m. to raise children that are not mine. I am done paying for bills that are not my responsibility. I am done sacrificing my education, my future, my life for people who have shown me nothing but contempt and entitlement. I am leaving this house, and I am taking my truck with me." Now, before you think this is just another story about someone cutting off their toxic family, let me tell you something. This is where it gets interesting, because my mother watching this right now probably thinks there is no way I actually followed through. She probably thinks I backed down and gave in like I always did. She said to me once that I would never have the courage to make the kind of tough decisions needed to actually escape this situation. She told me I did not have what it takes to build a real life for myself. But here is what my mother did not count on. Here is what everyone in that living room underestimated. I was not the same Miranda that had been slowly drowning for the past 8 years. Something had snapped inside me, and it had not snapped toward breaking. It had snapped toward survival. Because if you are struggling right now, if you feel trapped by the weight of other people's expectations and demands, if you feel like you are invisible even though you are doing everything, then what happens next in this story is for you. What I am about to tell you changed everything for me, and I want to show you that it is possible to reclaim your life even when the odds feel completely stacked against you. Please hit that like button right now if you believe that your life matters more than anyone else's convenience. Subscribe to the channel because this community is full of people who understand what it means to fight back against a system designed to keep you small. And if you want to see how I actually pulled this off, how I managed to escape with my sanity intact and build a life that was actually mine, then keep watching because it is about to get real. I had exactly 2 hours before my shift at the warehouse the next morning to execute what I had decided would be my greatest escape plan ever. I woke up at 3 a.m. while the house was still dark and silent, and I moved through the rooms like a phantom. I packed a single duffel bag with the essentials, 5 changes of clothes, my important documents, my passport that I had renewed years ago, with a secret dream of leaving that I had never fully admitted to myself, my laptop, and the one photograph I had of myself before this life had consumed me. I was 18 years old in that picture, smiling at a beach in California, before I came back to Reno to help out temporarily with Jada's first kid. Temporary had turned into 8 years. I left a note on the kitchen counter addressed to no one in particular and everyone in general. I did not apologize. I did not over-explain. I simply stated facts. I have gone to pursue my education and my own life. I have paid for 5 children who are not mine. I have sacrificed 8 years of my youth. That time ends now. I am transferring my responsibilities to the people who created them. The children deserve better than having an aunt who is emotionally destroyed. Their parents deserve to finally take responsibility for their own choices. I wish you all well, but I cannot set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. I drove away from that house in my Tacoma truck at 4:15 a.m. with the sky just beginning to lighten on the eastern horizon. I did not cry. I did not look in the rearview mirror. I simply drove forward into the unknown. My first stop was my workplace at the warehouse. I walked into the manager's office and requested an emergency meeting with the director of human resources. I had been saving for this moment without even realizing it. I had been building a case against myself in my own mind, listing every single way I was inadequate and unprepared. But in that moment, I decided to flip the narrative. I explained to the HR director that I had been maintaining a 60-hour work week while simultaneously managing significant family responsibilities that were impacting my mental health and ability to perform at my best. I requested a transfer to the overnight shift with full-time hours, and I explained that I would be relocating to a situation where I could focus entirely on my career development and education. To my surprise, they agreed immediately. My supervisor had always valued my work ethic. They had never once complained about my performance. They simply had not realized I was drowning because I had never told them the truth. By the end of my shift that morning, I had secure housing lined up. One of my coworkers, a woman named Patricia who had always shown me kindness, offered me the guest room in her house while I figured out my next steps. She did not ask 1,000 questions. She simply said, "You look like you need a fresh start. My home is open to you." I checked into a budget motel that night while I waited for Patricia's offer to officially begin. I sat on the edge of a stiff mattress in a room that smelled like old cigarettes and broken dreams, and I felt something I had not experienced in almost a decade. Felt relieved. I felt hope. I felt like I had finally chosen myself. The explosion came exactly 18 hours after I left the house. My phone began to buzz with relentless calls and text messages from every number in my contact list. I watched the notifications stack up like digital evidence of how deeply I had disrupted the carefully balanced system of manipulation that had held me hostage. Jada called 23 times in a single hour. Her voicemails escalated from furious to pleading to threatening in rapid succession. The first one was pure rage. "You think you can just abandon your family? You think you can leave me like this? You are the worst person I have ever known. You are selfish and pathetic, and I hope you regret this for the rest of your life." The second voicemail, recorded just 5 minutes later, had shifted into something more sinister. "You know I am pregnant and vulnerable. You know I have 5 children who depend on me. How could you do this? If anything happens to me or my baby because of your abandonment, that blood is on your hands, Miranda. That blood is on your hands." The third voicemail sounded almost broken. "Please come home. I am scared. Derek hit me and I do not know what to do. Please, Miranda, I need you. The kids need you. Come home and we can work this out. I am sorry for everything. Just please come home." I listened to that one 3 times, and each time my chest tightened. This was the manipulation I had been trained to respond to. This was the emergency that demanded I drop everything. This was the crisis that required my immediate intervention. But I had made a decision the night before, and I held on to it with every ounce of strength I possessed. I called the local police department and reported the alleged domestic violence. I provided them with Jada's address and explained the situation. Then I blocked her number. Grandma Lorraine tried a different approach. She called my personal cell and used a tone that I had never heard from her before. It was almost gentle, almost apologetic. She explained to me that Jada was having an emotional breakdown and that the children were confused and frightened by my sudden departure. She asked me to please reconsider, just for the sake of the children. The children are not your responsibility anymore, I said to her, my voice steady. I was 18 years old when I became their unofficial parent. I have given 8 years of my life to raising them. That is 8 years I will never get back. I have missed birthdays, graduations, and opportunities because I was too busy cleaning up someone else's mess. I am done, Grandma. I love those kids, but I love myself more now. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Grandma Lorraine said something that I will never forget. Your mother was wrong about you, Miranda. I see that now. I am sorry it took this for me to understand. She hung up, and I never heard from her again. Derek did not bother with phone calls or manipulation. He showed up at my workplace 3 days after I left. He tried to intimidate the security guard at the warehouse, demanding to know where I was. When they refused to give him any information, he left a note in the parking lot under my truck's windshield wiper. The note was crude and threatening. It contained language so vile that I immediately reported it to the police. They took a report and issued Derek a warning about harassment and intimidation. The police actually seemed relieved to have documentation of his behavior, which made me wonder how many other women he had intimidated over the years. But the hardest part was not Jada's manipulation or Grandma Lorraine's guilt trips or Derek's threats. The hardest part was the realization that none of the people who claimed to love me had ever actually asked how I was doing. They had never once checked in to see if I was overwhelmed or exhausted or suffocating under the weight of their expectations. They had simply taken and taken and taken until I had nothing left to give. Living with Patricia was like stepping into an alternate reality where people behaved like actual human beings. She had her own life, her own job, her own responsibilities, and she made space for me without demanding that I become her personal servant in return. On my 3rd night at her house, she knocked on my bedroom door carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. We sat on the edge of my bed, and she asked me a question that nobody else had ever asked before. What do you actually want, Miranda? Not what your family wants. Not what you think you should want. What do you genuinely want for yourself? I had to think about that for a long time. I realized that I had spent so long being what everyone else needed that I had completely lost track of who I actually was. I was not sure anymore what brought me joy or what I was passionate about or what I wanted my future to look like. Patricia listened to my confusion without judgment. She simply said, "Well, let's figure it out together. You have time now. You have permission to figure it out." With Patricia's support, I enrolled back in college at the local community college. I signed up for general education requirements with a focus on business administration. I had always been good with organization and problem solving, and I wondered if that skill set could translate into something meaningful. I picked up additional shifts at the warehouse and was eventually promoted to shift supervisor. My supervisor told me that she had always known I had leadership potential, but she could never understand why I seemed so defeated all the time. When I explained that I was raising 5 children that were not mine, she literally sat down in her office chair like her legs had given out. "That explains so much," she said quietly. "And that is absolutely not okay, Miranda. That is not okay at all. I am going to make sure you are compensated fairly for your talent from this point forward." Within 2 months, I had enrolled in college, moved out of Patricia's guest room and into my own studio apartment, and had established a routine that actually allowed me to breathe. I was working full-time as a supervisor, attending classes 2 nights a week, and having real conversations with people who were not trying to use me or manipulate me. I started going to therapy, which was the greatest decision I made during that entire recovery period. My therapist helped me understand that what I had experienced was not normal or acceptable. She gave me language for what had happened to me. She called it parentification, which means I had been given adult responsibilities as a child without the actual authority to make decisions. She helped me understand that my guilt about leaving was not valid because I had not created the situation. My family had created it, and then they had made me responsible for fixing it. 3 months after I left the house, I received a certified letter from my mother. She had finally broken her silence, and she wanted to meet with me. The letter was several pages long, and it was the most honest communication I had ever received from her. She wrote about how she had always hoped that I would develop a stronger sense of family responsibility. She wrote about how she had watched me sacrifice myself for years and had felt guilty, but had not known how to stop it. She wrote about how my departure had forced her to confront some harsh truths about her own parenting and her relationship with Jada. She ended the letter by asking if I would meet with her at a coffee shop near the warehouse. She promised she would not try to convince me to come home or ask me to sacrifice anything else. She simply wanted to hear my story. I agonized over whether to respond to that letter. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely and move forward with my life without processing anything with her. But another part of me knew that I would carry this bitterness forever, unless I gave her the chance to understand what she had allowed to happen. We met on a Saturday morning at a coffee shop I had chosen, somewhere neutral where I could leave whenever I wanted to leave. My mother arrived 10 minutes early and was already sitting at a corner table when I walked in. She looked older than I remembered. There were deeper lines around her eyes, and her hands were shaking slightly as she held her coffee cup. I sat down across from her without any greeting or preamble. I simply began to speak. "I need you to understand something," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "When I was 18 years old, you asked me to help out temporarily while Jada got back on her feet. I agreed because I was your daughter and you asked me. But then that temporary situation turned into years and years of being responsible for 5 children that I did not create. Nobody ever asked me if I wanted that responsibility. Nobody ever checked in to see if I was okay. Nobody ever protected me from the demands that were being placed on me." My mother started to say something, but I held up my hand. I was not finished. "I missed college the first time around because I needed to work and take care of kids. I delayed my own life over and over again because our family system depended on me sacrificing myself. I did not resent the children because they did not choose that situation either. But I deeply resented the adults who knew what was happening and did absolutely nothing to stop it." Tears were streaming down her face now, but I continued. "When I finally had to choose between my own survival and continuing to enable my sister's irresponsibility, I chose myself. And that was not selfish. That was survival. That was the most healthy decision I have ever made, and it required me to disappoint people I love. But I had to do it." My mother did not argue with me. She did not make excuses for her own behavior. She simply sat there and cried while I told her the truth about the life I had been living. When I finished, she reached across the table and I allowed her to take my hand. She said something so quiet I almost did not hear it. "I have failed you in every way that mattered, and I am so sorry." That moment did not erase 8 years of neglect. It did not undo the sacrifices I had made or the future I had lost. But it was a beginning. It was an acknowledgement that what had happened was not normal or acceptable. And for the first time since I was 18 years old, I felt like my mother might finally see me as a person and not just a solution to her problems. 4 months after I left the house, the police investigation into Derek's threatening note resulted in a harassment charge. He was ordered to attend anger management classes and to stay 500 feet away from me and my workplace. It was not the dramatic courtroom confrontation I might have once fantasized about, but it was vindication nonetheless. More significantly, Jada was forced to actually parent her own children for the first time in years. Without me there to manage the household, the chaos finally became visible to people outside the family. A teacher noticed that Sophie had worn the same clothes to school 3 days in a row. The daycare reported that Leo had significant behavioral issues that indicated he was not receiving proper emotional care. The school counselor recognized that Megan was showing signs of anxiety and depression. Child Protective Services became involved. They did not remove the children, but they did place the family under supervision. They required Jada to attend parenting classes and to establish a more stable living situation. They ordered psychological evaluations for all 5 children. They made it clear that the free childcare and emotional labor that I had been providing was actually harming the children's development. I was contacted by a social worker who wanted to understand the family structure. When I explained that I had been the primary caregiver for 5 children starting when I was 18 years old, with no formal guardianship or legal authority, the social worker literally said, "That is one of the most concerning situations I have encountered in my entire career." That statement validated everything I had been feeling. What I had done was not noble, it was enabling. By protecting Jada from the consequences of her irresponsible behavior, I was actually preventing her from becoming a responsible parent. By sacrificing my own future, I was teaching her children that love meant abandoning yourself for other people's needs. The healthiest thing I could have done for those children was to refuse to enable their mother's dysfunction. And that was exactly what I had done. But there was an unexpected outcome from all of this that I never anticipated. After about 6 months of being forced to actually parent her own children, Jada reached out to me. She did not call me screaming or threatening. She called me crying and asking if I could meet with her to talk. I was hesitant. I had promised myself that I would not allow myself to be pulled back into the emotional drama of that household. But I also knew that if I completely shut her out without hearing her, I would be making the same mistake that had been made with me. I would be refusing to see her as a person capable of growth and change. We met at the same coffee shop where I had met with my mother. Jada looked exhausted and broken in a way I had never seen before. She had actually learned to do her own laundry, make her own meals, and care for her own children without relying on someone else to fix everything. "I do not know how you did it," she said to me, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how you managed 5 kids, a full-time job, and tried to continue your education. It is the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life, and I only have to do it when you are not here to help." She apologized. Not a quick apology designed to manipulate me back into compliance, but a genuine apology where she actually acknowledged what she had done. She talked about how she had been so focused on her own needs and desires that she had completely missed the fact that I was drowning. She talked about how she had rationalized taking me for granted by telling herself that I was strong and capable and that I liked being needed. "But that was not fair to you," she said. "You were not strong. You were broken. And I kept breaking you more because I was too selfish to see it." I listened to her words, and I realized something important. She was not the villain in my story. She was not evil or intentionally cruel. She was just a person with her own trauma and her own inability to handle responsibility, and the system had allowed her to avoid facing those issues by placing all the burden on me. But that did not mean I had to forgive her immediately or reestablish our previous relationship. Healing from betrayal is not a quick process, and it requires more than just an apology. "I believe that you are sorry," I said to her, "and I believe that you are trying to do better. But I need you to understand that I cannot be your support system anymore. I cannot be the person who fixes everything when you break. I have to take care of myself. And that means maintaining some distance between us. She nodded, and she did not try to negotiate that boundary. We established a new relationship based on occasional phone calls and supervised visits, where I would see the children in a neutral location. Jada was required to arrange her own childcare and plan these visits like a responsible parent would. 2 years after I left that house, I graduated from community college with an associate degree in business administration. I stood on the stage in my cap and gown with no other family members in the audience except Patricia, who cheered so loudly that the people around her started to laugh. My mother and grandmother attended the ceremony, sitting 3 rows back. I saw them crying, and afterward my mother told me that she was proud of me in a way she had never felt pride before. She was not proud of me for sacrificing myself or for being responsible. She was proud of me for choosing my own life. I was promoted to manager at the warehouse after my graduation. I was given a team of 15 people to supervise, and I brought a completely different philosophy to that management style. I made sure that every person working for me knew that I would not allow them to be exploited. If someone was working too many hours, I addressed it. If someone was being treated unfairly by corporate, I advocated for them. If someone needed to step back from work to deal with personal issues, I protected their position. I decided not to pursue a 4-year degree immediately. I wanted to spend some time making sure that my decision to leave had been the right one. I wanted to make sure I was pursuing education because I genuinely wanted it, not because I was running from something or trying to prove something to someone else. After about 18 months in my management role, I realized that what I truly wanted was to help other people who were trapped in similar situations. I began volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helps young people who are aging out of the foster care system. Many of them were in situations similar to mine, where they had been given adult responsibilities without the legal protections or support systems that should have been in place. I was training to become a counselor and social worker. I was channeling all of my painful experiences into something meaningful. All of the knowledge I had gained about managing chaos and emergency responses and emotional manipulation was being transformed into skills that could help other people. 3 years after I drove away from that house in my Tacoma truck, I sat down with my therapist and discussed what it meant to truly heal from this experience. She asked me a question that made me think deeply about everything that had happened. "Do you regret leaving?" she asked. I did not hesitate. No, not for a single second. Leaving was the greatest act of self-love I have ever performed. But then she asked the follow-up question. "Do you regret the time you spent raising those children?" That one took longer to answer, because the truth is complicated. I do regret the years I lost. I do regret the educational opportunities I missed. I do regret the fact that I was never able to just be a normal 20-something-year-old without the weight of 5 children on my shoulders. But I do not regret knowing those children. I do not regret being the one person in their lives who actually saw them and cared about them during a period when nobody else was capable of doing so. I do not regret teaching them that it was possible to be responsible and to care about other people. I do not regret being the example of resilience and problem-solving that they desperately needed. The tragedy was not that I was there for them. The tragedy was that I was the only one there for them. The tragedy was that their own mother and father were so consumed with their own needs that they could not be present for their own children. That was the real crime. By leaving, I did not hurt those children. By leaving, I actually forced their parents to finally step into their roles and become the adults they needed to be. The children were better off having a fully present, slightly involved aunt than they were having a destroyed, exhausted, resentful pseudo-parent pretending to be a mother. My relationship with the children continued to develop over the years in a healthier way than it had before. Justin, my oldest nephew, graduated from high school with a 3.8 GPA. He told me that the turning point for him came when I left, because it forced him to step up and help his younger siblings without the safety net of having me around to fix everything. He developed into a responsible, capable young man who actually believed in his own potential. Caleb, my 10-year-old nephew when I left, became obsessed with mathematics and science. His teacher told me at one of our supervised visits that he was one of the brightest students she had ever taught. He was pursuing a STEM pathway in middle school and dreaming about becoming an engineer. When I asked him why he was so passionate about this, he told me something that broke my heart in the best way possible. He said, "I want to build things that help people. I want to be like you." Sophie, my 7-year-old niece, was learning to be independent without being forced into premature maturity. She was playing with dolls again and being a kid instead of a second mother to her younger siblings. Her anxiety improved dramatically once the household became more stable. She started taking dance classes through the school, and she had found something that made her genuinely happy. Megan, my 13-year-old niece, came to me 3 years after I left and asked if I would help her apply to a college preparatory program. She was on a path to break the cycle that had trapped so many people in our family. She was the one who fully understood why I had to leave. She came to one of our visits and hugged me, and she whispered in my ear, "I am so glad you got out. I am going to get out too." And Leo, my 4-year-old nephew, had developed into a sweet, well-adjusted little boy who actually had secure attachment with his mother now that she was forced to be present with him every single day. He had also developed a stutter when I first left, which his developmental pediatrician said was caused by anxiety and lack of emotional security. That stutter disappeared within 6 months, once Jada began to actually parent him consistently. Every single one of those children benefited from the fact that I chose myself. Every single one of them was better off because I refused to enable their mother's irresponsibility anymore. That is the most important lesson I learned from this entire experience. If I could go back and speak to my 18-year-old self, the version of me who agreed to help out temporarily with my sister's first baby, I would tell her some very specific things. I would tell her that helping out occasionally is not the same as becoming a full-time parent. I would tell her that when you start taking on responsibilities that are not yours, people will allow you to continue taking on those responsibilities indefinitely because it makes their lives easier. I would tell her that there is nothing noble or beautiful about sacrificing yourself for people who are not even aware that you are sacrificing. I would tell her that the guilt she feels for having her own needs and desires is not valid. I would tell her that wanting to go to college does not make her selfish. I would tell her that needing sleep and mental health and time for herself is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Most importantly, I would tell her that she cannot save people who do not want to be saved. You cannot make someone responsible. You cannot force someone to be a good parent. You cannot love someone into being a better version of themselves. The only person you can actually save is yourself. I would tell her that leaving is not abandonment. Leaving is the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved, even though it will feel like the cruelest thing in the moment. What I did not expect was how my decision to leave my family would inspire other people in my extended family to make changes as well. My grandmother, who had always enabled Jada's behavior, came to understand through watching this situation unfold that she had been perpetuating dysfunction. She stopped offering Jada money for frivolous purchases. She stopped making excuses for her behavior. She actually showed up to help with the children, but she also set boundaries and expected Jada to take responsibility for her own life. My mother, who had allowed me to take on adult responsibilities as a teenager, spent years in therapy processing her own childhood trauma and understanding how she had repeated those patterns with her own children. She never explicitly apologized for failing to protect me, but her changed behavior was an apology in itself. She became more involved with her grandchildren in a healthy way, where she could be their grandmother without being their primary caregiver. Even Derek, who had initially threatened me and tried to intimidate me, eventually faced consequences for his behavior. The police report and the harassment charge forced him to confront the fact that his aggressive behavior was not acceptable. He was required to attend anger management classes as part of his probation, and while I do not know if he truly changed his fundamental nature, I do know that he never contacted me again. People often ask me if I regret leaving my truck key behind when I could have taken Jada to her appointments myself. They ask me if I feel guilty for not showing up for the family emergencies that happened after I left. They ask me if I wish things could have gone differently. My answer is always the same. I do not regret any of it. But I want to be clear about something. This is not a story about revenge. This is not a story about me getting the upper hand or proving that I was right and everyone else was wrong. This is a story about survival. This is a story about recognizing when you are drowning and choosing to swim to shore instead of continuing to sink. The revenge was not something I orchestrated or planned. The revenge was that by removing myself from the equation, the system that had been enabled by my self-sacrifice finally had to collapse and rebuild itself in a healthier way. By choosing myself, I inadvertently forced everyone around me to face the consequences of their own behavior. That is the greatest revenge. Not destruction or punishment, but forcing people to face the natural consequences of their own choices. That is what creates real change. 5 years after I left that house, I made the decision to pursue my 4-year degree. I enrolled at the University of Nevada, Reno, with a focus on social work and family counseling. I was 31 years old, and I was the oldest person in most of my classes, but I did not care. I had a mission. I was going to spend the rest of my career helping other people recognize when they were trapped in unhealthy family dynamics. I was going to teach people that saying no does not make them selfish. I was going to show young people that leaving a toxic situation is not always a bad thing. I was going to use every ounce of pain I had experienced to help someone else choose survival. During my internship at a local family services nonprofit, I encountered a situation that was eerily similar to my own. A 19-year-old young man named Michael had been living with his mother and 3 younger siblings after his father passed away. Michael was working full-time at a grocery store while also managing the household, helping with homework, and covering most of the household expenses. His mother was dealing with untreated depression and had essentially checked out of parenting. I sat down with Michael and I told him my story. I told him about Jada and Derek and the years I spent drowning. I told him about the moment I chose myself. I watched his face as recognition dawned on him that his situation was not normal and that he was not responsible for fixing his mother's mental health crisis. "But what happens to them if I leave?" Michael asked me, and I heard the same guilt in his voice that I had carried for so many years. "They figure it out," I told him gently. "Just like my family figured it out. Your mother will either rise to the occasion and become the parent she needs to be, or she will face the natural consequences of her own choices. Either way, that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to build a life for yourself." Michael did leave his mother's house. He moved in with a friend from work. He enrolled in community college with dreams of becoming a nurse. He maintained contact with his siblings and helped them emotionally, but he no longer managed their basic needs. His mother was forced to seek treatment for her depression and to actually parent her own children. The last time I spoke with Michael, he was working as a nursing assistant at a local hospital and had been admitted to the nursing program at the university. He told me that my story had literally saved his life because without permission to prioritize himself, he would have continued to sacrifice until he had nothing left to give. That is the impact that one person's decision to choose survival can have on other people. 7 years after I drove away from that house, I was invited to attend Megan's high school graduation. Megan was graduating with honors. She had maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school. She had been accepted into 3 different universities with full scholarships. She had applied for and received a leadership award that recognized her commitment to helping other students. When Megan crossed the stage to receive her diploma, I was sitting in the audience with tears streaming down my face. I was not the only one crying. My mother was crying. Grandma Lorraine was crying. Even Derek, who had shown up to support the family, was wiping away tears. But the most important moment came after the ceremony when Megan found me in the crowd and pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the gymnasium. "I want you to know something," she said to me, her voice steady and clear. "I would not be graduating right now if you had not left. I would not have the confidence to pursue my dreams if I had stayed in that house feeling invisible and unimportant. You showed me that it is possible to choose yourself, and that choosing yourself is not selfish. You showed me that I do not have to sacrifice my future for other people's irresponsibility. I am going to be a teacher, and I am going to tell my students the same thing. You saved my life, Miranda." I held her while she cried, and I realized something profound. This entire ordeal, as painful and difficult as it had been worthwhile, not because I had gotten revenge or proved anyone wrong, but because I had shown the people I loved most that survival is possible. That transformation is possible. That breaking the cycle is possible. 10 years after I left that house, I was working as a licensed clinical social worker with my own therapy practice. I specialized in helping people who were trapped in unhealthy family dynamics. I had clients ranging from teenagers dealing with parentification to adults in their 60s who were finally recognizing that they had spent their entire lives catering to the needs of family members who did not truly appreciate or respect them. My practice was called Second Chances, and it was located in a beautiful office building in downtown Reno. On the window, in elegant lettering, were my credentials and my mission statement. Everyone deserves the opportunity to build a life that is truly theirs. Jada came to see me at my practice one day. She had requested a session with me, and I had agreed, though with professional boundaries firmly in place. She was now a functioning adult who held down a job as a dental hygienist. She had maintained custody of all 5 children, and they were all doing well. She had also sought therapy to address her own issues and had worked extensively on understanding why she had made so many destructive choices. We sat in my office, and she looked at me with genuine respect for the first time in our lives. "I owe you everything," she said. "But more importantly, my children owe you everything. You refused to enable my dysfunction, and it forced me to become the mother they deserved. If you had continued to sacrifice yourself for us, we would all be in a much worse place right now." I listened to her words, and I acknowledged the truth in them. But I also recognized that this conversation was about her finding closure, not about me granting forgiveness or absolution. "I am glad you were able to change," I told her professionally. "I am glad you were able to face your issues and become a better parent and person. But I need you to understand that my primary responsibility is not to your healing. My primary responsibility is to my own healing and to helping other people find their way to safety." She nodded, and she did not try to make this about our relationship or our shared history. She simply thanked me and left. If you are still watching this video, if you are still here with me, then I want to speak directly to you. I want to speak to anyone who is reading this transcript or listening to this audio and feeling that familiar weight on their chest, that weight that says, you are responsible for other people's lives. That weight that says you are selfish if you prioritize your own needs. I am here to tell you that weight is a lie. That weight was placed on you by people who wanted your sacrifice more than they wanted your happiness. That weight is not your responsibility to carry. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose yourself. And that choice does not make you a bad person. That choice makes you a person who respects themselves enough to demand better. The people who love you will understand. The people who do not understand are showing you that they do not truly value you as a person. They value you as a tool, as a means to solve their problems, as a way to make their lives easier. That is not love. That is exploitation. Real love looks like boundaries. Real love looks like someone asking how you are doing and actually caring about the answer. Real love looks like someone being happy when you choose yourself because they want you to be happy more than they want you to be useful. I spent 8 years learning this lesson the hard way. I spent 8 years drowning before I finally chose to swim. But I also got to the other side. I got to the place where I could build a life that was truly mine. And I got to watch 5 children thrive because their parents were finally forced to be present with them. As I sit here today, 12 years after driving away from that house in my Tacoma truck, I think about that 26-year-old version of myself who was so exhausted that she could barely stand. I think about the way she felt invisible despite doing everything. I think about the way she had completely lost track of who she was underneath all of those responsibilities. I want that version of me to know that it gets better. I want her to know that the guilt she feels is not valid. I want her to know that the people who love her will eventually come to understand why she had to leave. But more importantly, I want anyone watching this right now to know those things about themselves. I want you to know that your life matters. I want you to know that your dreams are valid. I want you to know that you deserve to be happy, not just useful. The most important revenge I ever served was not something I did to anyone else. It was something I did for myself. I chose myself. And in choosing myself, I inadvertently saved my entire family by forcing them to finally grow up and take responsibility for their own lives. That is the real story here. That is the transformation that matters. Not destruction, not punishment, just the quiet, powerful act of choosing to survive. If this story resonated with you, if you felt something shift inside you while listening, then please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me your story, because every single person who recognizes themselves in my experience and chooses to change their life is a victory. Every single person who says no to exploitation is a victory. My mother said I would never reach 1,000 subscribers with stories like this. But I believe that real stories matter. Authentic stories matter. Stories about survival and transformation matter. Because someone out there right now is sitting in a chaotic house, feeling invisible, thinking they have no way out. And maybe my story will be the thing that finally gives them permission to choose themselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, your life is worth more than anyone's convenience. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be free. Welcome to the next chapter of your life. It starts the moment you say no.